From a simple cup of coffee to insurance premiums, climate change made life more expensive for really all of us this last year.
And to break down how our warming planet brought on rising costs in 2022, we want to bring in Jake Biddle. He's the staff writer for grist.org. We really thank you for being with us here, Jake. And we know everybody's feeling the punch. There's always talk about inflation and just how much the price of eggs cost. We were talking about that earlier this week. So can you break down the climate angle here and what the headline is for that?
Right. Yeah. So underneath inflation, there's a lot of different causes, right? There's the war in Ukraine, pandemic, supply chain disruptions. But what we found is that a lot of goods are getting more expensive because of individual climate stresses, right? So it's a little bit different in each case, but one big one is utility costs for heating and electricity and water. So basically, as drought stresses Western water systems, or as hurricanes damage a power grid, or as it gets really, really hot in the summer and people turn up their air conditioning systems, that taxes the utilities that bring all that stuff to us. They bring us power and gas and water. Those utilities have to recoup the cost of all that climate stress, and so they pass on that cost to ratepayers. So your gas bill goes up if it gets very, very cold and there's really high gas demand, or in the summer, if everyone's using their air conditioner and the grid gets really stressed, the utility has to charge you more. The second big thing that we saw is that a lot of crops, from olive oil in Spain to citrus in Florida, got disrupted by either long stretches of drought or really violent rain. So when that happens, there's much less supply. Orange harvest gets cut in half, or olive oil doesn't get produced as much, and you pay a lot more in the grocery store for those things.
Okay, so
those are sort of the two main buckets.
Yeah, with all that said, does buying local, I would assume, helps? Perhaps even if you think at the time you're buying it might be a little more expensive, is it usually the better option than buying, abroad?
It really depends, right? I mean, in some cases, right, like in New York State, where I live, we have a lot of local farming, and it's usually better to buy, this sometimes more resilient supply chains for those goods. But some things, we just can't really get locally, right? Like almost all the winter vegetables, lettuce, nuts in this country are produced in California, and they require a lot of water. And so when those farmers can't get water because they're in a drought, there's just nowhere really else to get that stuff in the United States. So those prices are going to go up no matter what. And there's very little you can do.
Yeah, I was going to say back in the day, it wasn't really, but there was a time when you just didn't get those items if it was out of the season.
Yes, exactly.
It used to be a big deal to bring oranges up to New York, in the middle of.
It's true.
So there's that too. We could go back to.
You mentioned utility costs. One of the reasons our utility costs are going up so much is because of the strain on the grid that we hear about when it comes to these cold snaps or warm-ups or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So in the winter 2021, the Texas grid all but collapsed during an ice storm. Right. And power prices soared because everybody was needing to use their heat in order to keep their houses warm, but there just wasn't enough heat being generated in the state because a lot of power facilities had to go down, right? So people had these enormous electric bills. The same thing has happened in a lot of states over the summer, where you see it as sort of more of like a slow burn, right? Like there's just so much air conditioning being used that it gets very, very expensive, and you have to keep ratcheting it up. If it gets hotter, you have to keep turning the AC up, and all of a sudden you look at your power bill and it's massive. That can also lead to temporary outages, and then if the utility has to go repair the grid, they recoup that money from you. If they want to upgrade it to make it safer, that money comes from you as well.
And how often do the utility bills go up and they're like, okay, we're going to lower them this time?
Never.
Yeah, right.
And it's also, come on, the profits of these companies too.
Right.
That's another, player in this. Insurance premiums also going up as well. That's definitely, I feel like, directly related to the climate crisis. Bigger hurricanes, more hurricanes is the first thing that comes to mind. You can only keep up with so much homes getting destroyed.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of insurance companies in Florida, for instance, have basically said, well, it's really, really hard for us to turn a profit, so we don't want to be here at all. And the same thing is true for homeowners insurance companies that offer fire insurance in California. So either they jack up the premium so much that almost nobody can afford to pay it, or they just say, we don't want to be here, and so that leaves fewer insurers there, and then the remaining insurers can charge more money, right? Or in some cases, the state has to step in, as happened in Florida. They have kind of like a public option for hurricane insurance, but that's also very expensive, because the state has to make the money work as well. So yeah, a lot of those companies, they're getting really, really tetchy about offering this kind of coverage, and it's getting extremely cost burdensome in Florida and
That
California.
is a whole topic that we could spend literally an entire show on, just the insurance, especially with what's happening in Florida right now. We don't have time. Jake Biddle, we'll have to have you back to talk more about that.
Good combo, man.
Yeah,
Appreciate
staff
it.
writer for grist.org. We really appreciate you coming on.